We're back, and I'm here with Hal Smith in Searcy, Arkansas. Hal, how's it going?
Going well, thank you.
Good, good. And in San Francisco, in the famous Mission District, we have Nick Rossi. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
I'm Loren Schoenberg. I'm up in the Bronx, New York, and the three of us are together once again, the unholy three, to traipse through Benny Goodman's discography from the beginning of the Music Hall Band in early 1934. If this is the first episode that you're seeing, I'll just let you know that we started back in August 19th. Well, we didn't start in August 1934, but the recordings feels like it. No, I'm kidding. No, but we started with Benny Goodman and his Music Hall Orchestra recordings of August 1934, and going through studio session by studio session, occasional digressions, occasional live broadcasts, sometimes in a chronological flow. Sometimes we break that just to make a point or to talk about something. But that's where we are. And so I hope that you will check out the previous episodes. Hal plays the drums, Nick plays the guitar and other instruments and other percussion instruments, and I play saxophone and piano and a few other reeds as well. And we're approaching this material mostly from a musical angle. We leave the study of the discography and the record labels and other aspects, important aspects of the history, to others. We're looking at through the prism, for the most part, of guitar, bass, horns, arrangements, and music. And that's our focus here. And hopefully this will spawn other shows and other in-depth analyses of these things, which I would love to hear as well, too. We're in the midst of the Rhythm Makers sessions. These were a session that Benny and the band did on June 6, 1935. Back in those days, you couldn't play commercial recordings on the radio, or most of them you couldn't play. They weren't licensed. And so radio networks and other companies would record music expressly for the purpose of playing over the radio. That they paid a certain fee for it, and it was all the musicians were paid. Usually the band leader's name was never mentioned. Now, Benny Goodman was not a named band leader when he made these records in June 1936, but collectors have always loved them because they capture 51 tunes recorded back to back on June 6, 1935, of the great Goodman Orchestra in utero. Gene Krupa's there already, and Goodman and some of the other great sidemen who would stay with him throughout the years. The personnel: Nate Casebeer, Ralph Musillo, and Pee Wee Irwin on trumpets, Jack Lacey and Red Ballard on the trombones. The reed section: the legendary Toots Mondello, who will be leaving the band soon, Jaime Schertzer on the what they call second or third alto, who will take over the lead chair, Dick Clark and Art Rollini on tenor saxes, plus flutes and bass clarinets and baritone saxes on this session, Frank Froba, piano, Alan Roos, guitar, Harry Goodman, bass, and Gene Krupa on the drums, along with Benny. Let's get right to the music, and we jump in with the Bugle Call Rag. Now, this is a title that we've already heard the studio recording of, done for Columbia. Here is the Thesaurus Rhythm Makers, arranged by Dean Kincaid.
that didn't quite have the killer diller feel that the band would have just a few months later than that, like when they did the newsreel. And it sounded like all hell broke loose to me when they played it a little bit later on. They're still getting used to the arrangement, it sounds like, playing a little bit stiffer, not quite as comfortable with it, but you can see what's going to happen with just a couple more changes and a little more time playing together. I was interested to hear Nate Casebeer at the beginning playing lead and Pee Wee Irwin taking the solo. It was obvious to me who was playing when because of the difference in their style and their sound. I was interested in the drum fills. A lot of those sounded to me like they came from Chick Webb, especially the paradiddles at the end. That's something that Nick Fatul would play later on with the big bands that he played with. And Gene played the hi-hat right at the beginning of the song to get it underway. He played 2 choruses of ride cymbal, still kind of unusual for that point in time. Really made it get up and go when he did that. And I'm sure we all heard him kind of overlay a drum solo over Benny's solo. He was just cooking away on the snare drum underneath Benny. And that was probably, for me, that was the highlight of the whole side. And just, Gene Krupa sounded like he's having the time of his life there, even though the rest of the band wasn't completely loosened up yet. So that's what I heard on there.
Yeah. You mentioned a technical term, a paradiddle. Paradiddle. Is that 2 diddles?
Dot, 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 dot. Okay. And there's several ways to do it. Left, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, 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 left, left. And that's a hallmark of Chick Webb's solos and his fills. And I'm sure that's where Gene picked that up, because that's not something the New Orleans drummers did very much.
Right. So paradiddle is one word. It's not a pair of diddles.
That's correct. It's one long word.
Okay. Hey, listen, I try some corny old jokes here, but they work. But anyway. And, and it seemed to me, that Benny kind of uncorked a certain kind of wild crazy on that track that we just haven't heard yet. Beautiful playing, like on I Surrender Dear and many, many other titles, Benny at his best. But this is a different angle on Benny at his best, where, like the late night, more uninhibited, reaching for something, kind of stuff that he lets go on that solo is really something else. And Gene gets behind him with all those various things. And I don't know why. It's just like that red light went on of like a real hot jazz moment was going on there, unlike what we've heard before. This is the Dean Kincaid arrangement that they recorded for Columbia, and that will be modified by Jimmy Mundy, and which will show up, which they will do in Hollywood just about a year later, show up in the big broadcast of 1937. That will begin Benny's, I wouldn't call it phobia, but Benny's problem with drums. And we'll talk about that, how that happens, because Gene winds up getting the majority of the screen time in that clip. And I think that really did start something, but that's a long, long way away. Let's go to Nick Rossi, because there was certainly a lot to unpack there, too.
Sure. There was some really interesting things from a guitar point of view on this record. The first thing I can think of is there's a great example of kind of how to play, not how to play, or I should say one way of playing backbeat in the rhythm section, and then compared with another way of playing backbeat in the rhythm section, all within the same arrangement. At one point in time, it's almost like the entire section shifts in the backbeat, where Gene's playing it very heavily, as well as Alan Roos, and you can really feel how much, 2 players, 2 out of the 4, how much that really drives the point home, and it can be used very effectively as a rhythm tool. And there's another moment where Gene goes into the backbeat for a extended period of time, and Roos shifts over to more straight time, more 4/4 time, as kind of a counterbalance. And again, it's it's that kind of ever shifting rhythmic balance we've been talking about on a lot of these records, about these rhythm section musicians reacting to each other in split second manner and acting as a counterbalance, acting as a further emphasis of certain rhythmic figures or approaches. And so it was interesting to hear that within the context of the same song. One thing I will point out, we heard a lot of ride cymbal, as Hal pointed out. And you'll notice how much that particular cymbal washes out the rhythm guitar. And as that becomes more and more prevalent in larger ensembles and even smaller ensembles, you can see an example, an illustration of what we talked about a few episodes ago about, the guitar competing for certain space, not only in terms of the arrangements, but just in terms of the instruments on the bandstand. And so once the rhythm emphasis in the music shifts to that ride cymbal, you can hear why the guitar starts becoming questioned in terms of its value and its importance in ensembles, because it's in that same space. And oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes when a drummer puts a lot of emphasis on that ride, the guitar gets lost in the mix.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go to, it's been a while since we've heard a bona fide Fletcher Henderson classic, and we're going to hear one now. This is Can't We Be Friends? And Goodman would record it a little bit later. Here it is, a real Fletcher Henderson classic. Well, it's funny, that sounds to me, I mean, if I had to make a guess, I'd make a guess that Fletcher came in with the chart the night before or the week before, and Benny sounded a little, for him, and again, who Lord knows why he played what he played, but my thought is he sounded a little uncomfortable on the solo, and maybe he didn't know it that well. The band, not that they're pussyfooting, but in comparison to the nailed down way that they recorded it famously for Victor 2 years later, the phrasing isn't set. It just doesn't sound as confident a performance like if you compare it with the I Surrender Dear, where clearly they know that chart and every little nook and cranny is filled out. Little bit of alto there by Toots Mandela. So I was all ready to make that case that Fletcher must have just bought it in, and then I looked in Russ Kinder's discography, and there seems to be an incomplete broadcast performance from a couple of months earlier. So who knows? But very, very interesting. Nick, I know that on the studio recording and probably on some air checks from 37, Roos is very prominent on that track with some beautiful things. Here I didn't hear that much.
I didn't hear very much either. And speaking of 4/4, we heard a lot of 4/4 playing from him here, which again, something I talked about in earlier broadcasts. The shorthand version when people talk about Alan Roos is his emphasis on the backbeat on the 2 and 4. But he certainly very often played 4/4 time and was very capable and was just as effective of a rhythm player playing as such. So it's nice. It's nice to hear driving along. I mean, it's in some ways a less remarkable performance than the Victor version that we're talking about for some obvious reasons. But still, it's a nice driving performance, relaxed performance, and the rhythm section sounds good as they have on each of these sides.
I notice Harry Goodman would play in 2-beat and then play a couple measures of 4 and then go back to 2-beat, very New Orleans like as we've talked about, Ed Garland and Bill Johnson and people like that would switch up the feel like that, and that helped on that performance. Otherwise it could have been even more dance band like if he had just stayed strictly in 2-beat all the way through, and it probably wouldn't have worked to play 4-beat all the way through. It's just the tempo sounded to me just a little bit pushed. I would have liked to have heard that personally, heard it played a little bit slower. What I heard from Gene was basically playing dance band drums right off the arrangement, hitting the little hits with a very clipped sounding choke cymbal, not letting it ring at all. Almost like he was making an editorial comment on it. Like, oh, you want dance band style? Okay. And it sounded more like a spitting cobra than a drummer, hitting a choke cymbal. But in the last chorus, he switched to press rolls, and it just beefed up the whole sound of the rhythm section, made it more dynamic, and he played ride cymbal again. So at the very end, it started to wake up for me. Otherwise, I just didn't feel comfortable listening to it. I wouldn't want to try to dance to a tempo like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a little bit pushed.
And I should note, that the trombone solo there was by Red Ballard, or at least I think so. I know that I mentioned it while we were listening to it, and you both kind of nodded. And I think it's fair to say it's not Jack Lacey. And if it's not Jack Lacey, then it's Red Ballard. It's kind of interesting that we've heard him play solos here, kind of laying out the melody on some medium tempo things, rarely on a slow one and never on a medium or fast one. But when you get to this kind of medium, slow, medium tempo, he plays the melody sometimes. He sounds absolutely good. And that's one of the fun offshoots of this series, is just kind of getting more into the solo assignations, such as they were. Okay, so anyway, so here's Life as a Song, arranged by Spud Murphy. Life is a Song, arranged by Spud Murphy. That's the closest thing that we've heard, I think, so far to what sounds like a stock arrangement. Again, stock arrangements, for those who don't know, where when a song would come out, the publisher would publish an arrangement for bands to play. And they were very simple, very basic harmonically, played the melody out relatively straight. I mean, for this kind of song, there were stock arrangements of jazz things too. But and the idea was that even if you're not into chords or harmony, that instead of like having this many interesting notes, that you would bring it down to like maybe this many notes, so you could play it with a band even if you were missing this instrument or missing this instrument, and somehow the chords would still sound full because there were only 3 notes in the chords anyway, or just a few notes, and they were kind of dumbed down in a certain kind of way. And we really have not heard much of that from the Goodman Band at all, even when they play tunes that you've heard us refer to as hotel band-like or something like that. They're still very exquisitely written, and this one really was not in many ways. But I guess there's no point to go any further into what it's not. Let's talk about what it was, which was the band playing. It didn't sound like the Benny Goodman Band, didn't sound like any band. It just sounded like the so-and-so in his Hotel Taft Orchestra with some really good people in the band. Benny played beautifully on the clarinet, and there was a baritone sax melody chorus. Either by Jaime Schertzer or by one of the other guys. I think the baritone double in the pictures that we have of the Goodman Band at the Congress Hotel just a few months later, the 2 baritones are in the alto sax chairs. It's Bill DePue and Jaime Schertzer. So chances are it's one of the alto players playing that solo. And just in the course of a digression, it's interesting, there is a film of Benny playing baritone sax solos with the Ben Pollock Band, the famous 1929 Vitaphone short, when they play Song of the Islands, I think it is. You can see Benny playing the baritone sax, and of course, he also plays baritone, I think, on, what's that? That beautiful Blue and Broken Hearted from 1928, where he plays alto, baritone sax, and clarinet, all a la Frankie Trumbauer and Bix Beiderbecke. Very, very interesting. Right. So, the baritone sax had its place in Benny's background. So, a lot of food for thought there in this particular arrangement. I can't imagine what you guys have to add to this. I'm very interested to find out, what did you glean from Life as a Song? Yeah.
Well, there was Hal's pointing at me. I think Hal just volunteered me. There was a lot of guitar going on. There was a relatively busy Alan Roos line running throughout. Whereas we've heard his use of arpeggiated chords kind of sparsely here and there, sometimes behind a specific soloist or perhaps behind a vocalist. We heard it used as a device all throughout this particular arrangement, which gave it a nice alternative feel to just chunking out the rhythm or playing heavy backbeat rhythm all throughout. So it was nice to kind of dig into what Alan could do by sustaining that idea over the course of the entire song. What I liked overall about this recording and this arrangement, for that matter, is it gave a little bit more insight into what a lot of people wanted to hear at this time. I mean, Benny probably played a lot of these type of arrangements in the preceding 6 months on Let's Dance. I mean, we know a lot of the repertoire he performed on air and in nightclubs and in hotel ballrooms, but we don't know it all. And this is a great kind of snapshot of, part of what a band of his stature at this particular time would have to play, which makes the Fletcher Henderson arrangements, which makes some of these other interesting performances all that more impactful, and to put them in kind of proper historical context.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Harry Goodman play bowed bass too. Yeah, that was kind of a brass bass like feeling on that first chorus, and we can see films of how people did that, like Wellman Bro with Duke Ellington, where they would bow bow and then hold the bow in the air while they pluck the bass strings. I'm sure that's what he was doing there. It was a little bit difficult to hear the drums on that. I think Gene was very much under wraps and playing the arrangement, though he did play some time at the very beginning where the other rhythm instruments weren't playing. He was just playing unaccented 4/4 on the snare with the brushes. And that's something you hear in Chicago recordings of the 20s quite a bit. Almost all the drummers I can think of who recorded in Chicago during that era did that at some point, just playing time, sometimes by themselves with one other instrument or as an introduction. And speaking of Chicago, the way that Frank Frobo was playing behind the baritone solo reminded me of an earlier recording by Jess Stacy. In fact, it was Stacy's first recording. It was 1928 with Danny Altier and his orchestra. He played a lot of glissandos in the middle range and kind of sparkling piano at the treble end. And it's very, very Chicago style. A little more ornate than the way Jess played, but it was a nice little spice right in the middle of that performance to hear the piano at both ends of the keyboard playing behind that solo.
Yeah. Oh, this is fascinating stuff, and it's worth reminding our the people that are joining us for these things that part of the fun, and I think what we're trying to bring to it, and I think that we're succeeding, is kind of looking at this stuff from the vantage point. Nick, you just brought us right there of going forward, that the future is not preordained. No one knows what's going to happen to this band. Right now, this is a band on the way up. Lord knows what's going to happen. They're going to have a huge failure coming up. Benny is going to almost throw the towel in later this year. So this experiment of theirs to try and do something with this music, it almost died. And so this thesaurus session, the Rhythm Makers Orchestra of June 6, 1935, is a perfect snapshot and makes us appreciate what they eventually did at the time. One thing that I hope our listeners can do sometime is, spend some time looking through, and there are websites that you can access. There's one called RIPM online that most individuals can't have access to, but you can get access to it through your library or a school or some kind of institution. And they have all the downbeat metronomes, tempo magazines, dance band magazines from the early 30s on, all available digitally and searchable. And recently I spent some time in 1935, just starting in January 35, and looking at what the band business was then and what the band business was in January 36. And it is like, it's a sea change. It's remarkable what happened in that one year, then 36 to 37. And that, again, just helps you understand. Also, Nick, and you've seen a lot of these things, too, those wonderful guitar ads. In fact, I'm going to share one, I think in the previous broadcast when you were talking about Epiphone. And there's a wonderful early ad. In fact, some of the earliest Alan Roos images are ads for Epiphone, I believe. Does that sound right?
That's correct. Yeah, he was an endorser. I think the very first picture of Alan Roos in conjunction with any sort of instrument company was an Epiphone catalog, and he certainly appeared in some ads for Epiphone, much like his mentor George Van Epps had.
Right. And Hal, also, just as long as we're on this topic, I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that long before Gene Krupa and Chick Webb and Buddy Rich and the named drummers of the mid-30s, there were ads for drums, right? And there were ads for the drummer with Ted Weems or the drummer with this orchestra or with Roger Wolfcon or whoever the hell it was.
That's right. And there were also industry publications. The Leedy Drummer was one published by the Leedy Company. They would have little thumbnail sketches of Vic Burton or Benny Washington or jazz players interspersed with dance band players, the drummers who played with John Philip Sousa, whoever happened to play that brand. And there'd be photos of them, the description of the equipment they played, and not ads so much, but all of the images, they're posing with leady drums and leady equipment. Right. But you're right, the dance band drummers of the era were, especially Paul Whiteman's drummers. I remember there's a photo, I think it's George Marsh posing with Hoot Gibson, the cowboy actor.
Big star at the time.
Big star at the time, and the drummer showing Hoot Gibson his snare drum. Like Hoot Gibson would care what kind of snare drum this guy played. But that was a thing before Gene Krupa and Chick Webb and the other drummers we admire.
I know I've seen a lot of ads with Orman Downs.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and he
top
was
dance band drummer and very good jazz drummer. He was Baby Dot's favorite drummer.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. He played brushes earlier than a lot of other people did. I mean, entire sessions on brushes with maybe a cymbal crash here and there. Just a fantastic player, wonderful time, great swing. Could have easily made the transition to jazz, but he was making great bucks with Ted Weems.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's move on to our last title of this session. This is called Sweet Little You, and it's arranged by Spud Murphy.
Well, again, there was some really great subtle changes in the rhythmic accent shifts on the part of Alan Roos in that one. A lot of that patented 2-beat feel, backbeat feel. At the same time, there's these great moments where he just goes to that kind of what I've been calling that straightened out playing 4/4 time, and just does so ever so subtly. It's what I really have been enjoying about listening to these sides back to back is just all the little tips it gives a rhythm player to just shifting the emphasis from chorus to chorus, or even less than that, just depending on what's going on in the section, what's going on with the arrangement, what's going on with the soloist. And that was another great example of Harry Goodman shifting what he's playing, as well as, Roos shifting what he's playing. Gene probably was was playing it the safest of the rhythm section, perhaps I'll put it. But what it does, again, like we talked about, is just freeing each other up to shift these little emphases on things, and make it through the side. And I heard that cymbal again, I think, Hal.
I thought I heard it too, when
Yes.
in the section where they broke down into kind of a Dixieland format. That sounded like the Tim Tims. I thought it might be the stem of the hi-hat, but I think it was the Tim Tims.
Oh.
Very interesting. And notice Gene took control right at the start, playing those very authoritative press rolls.
Yep.
And it's almost like he said, I'm not going to let this just be a dance band performance. He stayed with the arrangement pretty much. Cymbal crashes, a couple of those sounded like they were his and maybe not in the arrangement, but I just loved the way he took charge on that and made it sound, gave it a real lift and a power at the same time. Interesting that song to me is like a lot of songs from that era. They're kind of a snapshot in time of the mid-1930s. There's songs that don't sound anything like the 1920s or what would come in the 40s. This sounds like something I'd expect it to be also recorded by Fats Waller and Wingy Manone and Bob Howard and Putney Dandridge and maybe Henry Red Allen. It's just got that kind of feeling. I'm surprised I haven't heard of this song before. It's really pretty, a very attractive song.
Yeah, and they played the heck out of it. Benny featured on the clarinet there, some tenor by Art Rollini, and they were pretty much the featured soloists that we hear, except for bits of trumpet from Pee Wee Irwin and occasionally a lead trumpet part there. And who knows, maybe on that little Dixieland trio chorus, maybe that was Nate Casimir, not sure. But interestingly enough, that's Spud Murphy, and again, the way you categorize Spud Murphy is by saying he's uncategorizable in terms of his approach. But there's always those, with the exception of that one track that we heard, there's always an interesting chord, an interesting change, an interesting modulation. This one had a little down at the bottom, little in the introduction. I don't know, it went boom, something just kind of an effect we haven't heard before. It had a kind of a very sudden modulation in the out chorus, just kind of out of nowhere. So there's all these little musical things that go on there. Well, listen, we've come to the end of yet another episode of our going through these thesaurus rhythm exercise. I got to compliment you, or just say, not compliment you, but just say how much I'm enjoying spending time with you. Listening to 51 tracks recorded the same day, with a lot of the stuff being kind of similar, to be able to dig out of it, as much interest. I think hopefully we're sharing our enthusiasm with all you out there, that there's just a world of music in this music, and all of it accessible in some way to the year that we're doing it in, what happens to be 2020, or maybe you're looking at this far down the road, you know what I mean? That there's elements of the music here that pertain not only to the past and the present, but also to the future. I'm Loren Schoenberg on behalf of Hal Smith and Nick Rossi. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.